Norberline would like to welcome you to the second day of Taking the Essence, Cultivating Awareness in Daily Life, where we will try to understand the importance of developing and maintaining a sense of open awareness both on and off the cushion. Eddie Peet's our teacher today, and you can find him at Langri Tangpa Center, and he's been there since 1997 teaching, so we've got some wisdom here. Thanks, Eddie, for sharing that wisdom with us today.
Okay, thank you, Shannon, and welcome everyone who's online with us. So I'm just going to take us to the introductory slide, and then we'll do a meditation, and then we'll begin the class. So I'll just move on to that now. So as Shayla has said, we're looking at awareness in daily life, and I'm trying to integrate this or present this program in relationship to the two mental factors called mindfulness and introspective awareness. And we're looking at how we can use those two mental factors on the cushion and off the cushion to improve our lives. So we begin as we normally do by doing a short breathing meditation. Then we'll do a meditation where we visualize the Buddha and take refuge together, and then we'll begin the class. So please get yourselves comfortable in your seat, adjust your posture until your back is nice and straight and your shoulders are relaxed. And allow yourself to breathe normally and naturally. And as you continue to breathe normally and naturally, become aware of the movements that take place within the body and the feelings associated with them. So just allowing the body and mind to relax. And the mind, while it is relaxed, to be focused. And with the body and mind relaxed and the mind focused, imagine that in the space in front of you appears Shakyamuni Buddha. And his body is made of golden light. And he is surrounded by your spiritual mentors, the deities, the bodhisattvas, and the protectors, and so forth. While sitting surrounding you are all sentient beings. And we are all facing the refuge field. And we can recollect that everybody sitting, surrounding us, and ourselves wish to avoid suffering. We all wish to be happy, but we all lack genuine happiness. Now, the causes that prevent genuine happiness can be eliminated. And the potential for this genuine happiness actually abides equally within all of us. So the purpose of our lives is to get in touch with this genuine happiness and work for the welfare of all those who have not yet done so. And we can do this by taking refuge in those who have established a genuine sense of happiness within themselves. And these are, of course, the Buddha himself and the Bodhisattvas, the deities, and so forth. So knowing that they are in front of us, we will take refuge in them. So we can recite this prayer 3 times and generate the mind of enlightenment. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Now, having made this wish, lights and nectar stream from the heart of the Buddha and wash over us. And they remove every obstacle and empower the potential that we have. And with this potential empowered, we recollect the 4 immeasurable thoughts of compassion, love, joy, and equanimity. And we decide to establish all beings in those states. Again, lights and nectars come from the heart of the Buddha, washing over us and all living beings. And we feel that the light and nectar reveals these 4 qualities as reflections of the mind's nature, effortlessly manifesting. And we see ourselves prostrating before the refuge field, making offerings, and confessing, laying down our burdens. We're now rejoicing and requesting and dedicating all of our actions towards the spiritual path and its eventual success. Again, to help us do that, we offer a mandala to accumulate the merit necessary to become enlightened and also help purify the negativities we've accumulated. So here we make the offering, understand that this will provide resources for us throughout countless lives and stop our miserliness and greed. We also put an end to the clinging that we have to our body, our conceptions, and the merit to be truly ours. Let's offer this mandala. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnayatanu. Mandala is released and the Buddha accepts it. And he smiles at us. And we look into his eyes and we feel completely accepted and at ease. So now an emanation leaves the heart of the Buddha and moves through space and comes to abide above the crown of your head. Facing in the same direction you are, the emanation begins to descend, entering the forehead, just above your eyebrows, and descending down to the level of your heart. The emanation expands, filling your body and mind with light and nectars. And these begin to pour out through the pores of the skin, filling the 10 directions of space, and establish every being within space to be within an enlightened state. And a sense of wonder should arise, thinking, wow, I've established all beings in the state of complete enlightenment. When a thought arises, this is only taking place on the level of imagination. And with that, all the lights begin to withdraw and come back into your heart. You feel yourself embodied, sitting on the chair. You think, actually, I've got to bring this state of perfect enlightenment about as soon as possible. Got to engage in the practices of Dharma and actualize the enlightened state to bring benefit to others. So I'm going to listen to this class, I'm going to engage in it the best I can and try and put it into practice. And then breathing in deeply through your nostrils, exhale through your mouth, allow your eyes to flutter open if they're closed, and just move your limbs, move your shoulders, hands, legs, and feel at ease in your seat. Okay, so last week we looked at these 2 topics, what mindfulness is and what introspection is. And I based that explanation primarily upon this book that you see in front of you. So if you recollect that mindfulness has got 3 distinguishing qualities. One is that the object has to be familiar to you, that you don't forget it, and that the function of mindfulness is so that we are not distracted away to other objects. So familiar, non-forgetting, and non-distraction. Whereas introspection is sort of like a state of meta-awareness. It's going over the object and your mind and looking at the qualities of those. So you don't have sinking and excitement in the mind. Not only that, it can tell you a great deal of information about the quality of mind itself and the object. And mindfulness and introspection sort of work together, and they enable us to be able to work for others skillfully. We know what to do, when to do it, and how we're doing it. Now today, we're going to have a look at how we can use mindfulness and vigilance in response to angry states of mind. So we're going to look at anger and its faults, first of all. And then we're going to look at how we can, and through that, look at how we can apply mindfulness and introspection to them. So that'll take up the first half of our program. Then we're going to look at the antidotes to anger and how we can apply mindfulness and introspection to the antidotes. During the class, we'll stop here and there for questions. There's a meditation within the presentation, and at the very end, we'll do a very brief review. Now, these are the resources, as well as other teachings I've had that I've been relying upon. Now, this book here, the big green one, Buddhist Psychology by Geshe Tashi Tsering, I've relied on this to present how the mind of anger has both very subtle and gross aspects. What other mental states come from anger, and the different types of divisions. So there's a very nice presentation in that book concerning this information, which I've never found in any of the other books. This other one, the science and philosophy, that was up at the beginning. I've kept on with that because also that has got very specific information about the states of anger. All the other books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books, Nectar of Mandatory Speech, Change of Heart, Healing Anger, Arya Davis 400, and Profound Emptiness and Practical Ethics. These books are fantastic for dealing with anger and having antidotes for them. Now, so if you find that you really wish to deal with your anger, there's Holiness's book, Healing Anger, Arya Davis 400, like I said, Nagarjuna's presentation on Precious Garland, and the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. You can't really go past those. They're just tremendous. Very practical ways of thinking. So this was a verse that we put up last week. I'll put it up for each class because, yeah, I mean, it's all here. If you wish to protect your mind, then you need to maintain mindfulness and introspection. And Shantideva sort of makes a prayer. He says, I'm joining my hands beseeching you to guard them both at cost of life and limb. In fact, without mindfulness and vigilant introspection, there's no way to hold on to the trainings. So these two mental factors are of supreme importance. There's no actual path up without them. So as we are,
Eddie, can you just for a moment, can you give us an example of what happens if we lose them? Like, what do you mean by there's no path? Does it mean that we just forget about Dharma, or we stuff up in some way?
There's no way to practice Dharma. If you're interested in the Dharma, so your interest, if your interest goes beyond reading it and just thinking of it as a philosophy, if you actually want to engage in its practice, there is no way to practice it without vigilance and introspection. And if you've heard different teachings on the trainings and you wish to engage in the training, you will not be able to do that without mindfulness and introspection. If you lose your mindfulness and introspection, you lose your practice, you lose your training. In fact, I'd say if you're a Buddhist and you're taking refuge, you've also lost your refuge. You will lose that too. So that's how important these two factors are. Now we're talking about anger, and this is how I'm going to go through it. I'm going to give you a definition of it first of all, and then I'm going to show you how it develops and what follows from its development. Like there's other types of disturbing emotions you can have that aren't anger, but are associated with them. Then we'll look at some of the different divisions of anger. And finally, the antidotes. And I'll do this again for next week when we have a look at desirous attachment. So the presentation will be very similar. So the first half will take definition, development, derivatives and divisions. We'll have a little pause, open it up for questions and so forth. And then we'll look at the antidotes and then have a pause again and look at and do the same thing.
As long as we don't run out of time for the antidotes.
No, I want to spend more time on the antidotes than all the rest of it. So this is the definition of anger coming up. Right? It is a deluded mental factor. So what's interesting here, I find, is if you ask some really simple questions like, what do you mean by deluded? Right? Why is this mental factor deluded? Well, it's because the mental factor, which is a factor of mind, has arisen from what's called inappropriate attention. So the attention is not appropriate. So you go, well, what does that mean? It means that whatever you're focused on, whatever you've placed your attention on, you're seeing it through the lens of self-grasping ignorance. And when that happens, you have what we call, you're going to very quickly develop wrong ideas about the object. And this factor called inappropriate attention has got both, it's on a spectrum from being sort of quite easy to understand and not so easy to understand. So the not so easy to understand part of inappropriate attention in a way is this grasping at true existence, grasping at inherent existence. So that means in a way, whatever your object is, whatever you've placed your attention on, it seems to be independent of the mind. It's existing within itself. And the gross aspect of it is that it's exaggerated in some way. So it is subtly exaggerated because the mental factors are dependent arising. The exaggeration has gone and made it intrinsically existent. So that's one way of exaggeration. But the other is the object exists in this sort of like one way. So when it's anger, it's all bad. The object's all bad. And what happens, what this inappropriate attention does, it makes the mind sort of unpeaceful and uncontrolled. So that's why it's deluded. So you see every disturbing emotion is based in a deluded mental factor. So there's a sense of intrinsic grasping there, or at least the objects appearing truly existent, and there's a sense of exaggeration there.
It is that why it's so easy for us to fall into anger, because we have that subtle kind of grasping at inherence to start with. Then we just kind of creep into the anger.
Yeah, we've got the habit of approaching these objects that way. So I'll put the next part, so because there's like 5 little bits, so I'll break it down, right? So you can actually see. So it observes, this deluded mental factor observes its contaminated object. So what I find interesting is that anger, being a deluded mental factor, cannot arise without an object. You cannot have anger without an object. So that's really good news, isn't it? Because I mean, if you find it getting angry because your mind is on the attention of an object, move it away from the object. Right? And you come, the anger just dissipates. Now, what does it mean? Another interesting word, contaminated. What does that mean here? Well, here it basically means that the object is associated with karma and cyclic existence. So let's say if the object was the person, another person, so we've got a deluded mental factor and it's observing its contaminated object. So if it's a conception of the person, an idea of a person, that's what it's observing, right? The idea, not an actual person. But whether it's an idea of a person or the aggregates of a person, we cannot apprehend that object purely. It always has to come through our mind, which is contaminated with karma and delusion already. So that's why the objects is always associated with our karma and delusion. Now, it exaggerates its bad qualities. So in other words, it's saying we've got an object that's contaminated already through our karma and delusion, and the object appears to us to be unpleasant. We don't like it. We get a bad feeling from it. Now that's okay, but what does it mean to say exaggerate? Well, it exaggerates it in two ways. One is that the unpleasant qualities of the object appear to be coming from the object itself, all from the object, and they're coming back at us and making us feel really unpleasant. The other way this deluded mind, this mental factor, is exaggerating it, is that only the bad appears. So, you know, like if you look at your child and they've been behaving badly and you find that unpleasant and you react to that, what happens at that time is only the bad behavior presents itself to you. And they appear to be bad. The behavior and the bad behavior, the child and the bad behavior seem to be the same thing. And that's all we can apprehend at that time. So that's how it's exaggerated. Because we know our children aren't all bad, right? They're pleasant people sometimes, aren't they? But with this mind, that pleasantness vanishes. Only the unpleasant, and like I said, the unpleasantness seems to be coming from the person themselves. So the behavior, the bad behavior of the person and the person seem to be one and the same thing. So you often hear people say, these monsters. They talk about people's bad behavior and the person themselves, they conflate, push them together, a monster.
And they call them evil or monsters or not human.
That's right.
These animals.
This is exaggeration. And it's undesirable. We don't want it. We want to push it away, get rid of it, have nothing to do with it. We want to be separate from it because it seems to be causing us a problem. And because it's doing that, or seeming to cause us a problem, we wish to harm it. If we can't get away from it, we want to harm it. And this is an important aspect of this definition and why I've made it up in red. Because without the intention to harm, it's not anger. The harm has to be there. And so this is a very important aspect of this definition. The element of harm must be within the mind of the person who is called angry. So frustration doesn't mean to say you want to hurt somebody, does it? So frustration is not anger. It can lead to anger, of course, but it's not anger.
Barbara has her hand raised.
Yep, Barbara?
Eddie, can you define more clearly for me what you mean by harm? You wish to harm it. Is that, I understand physical harm, but.
So harm can go all the way from killing, the taking of the life, to making their life very unpleasant through language. But like, suppose you want to hurt somebody, so you use language to do it.
So then, Eddie, sometimes when we get so frustrated or angry, we'll like slap our face, like face plant, rather than slap the other person. We just like put our head in our hands. So that's not harming, isn't it? That's being really frustrated, but not retaliating.
Yeah. And you can even have arguments, and the voice can be raised. But if if you say, "Stop being so angry," they go, I can say, "I'm not angry." You hear people say that, and it's like, well, do you have the intention to harm me? And it might, if you say no, then it's not anger. So now you'll see lately, His Holiness has been, when he's been talking about anger, they've been talking about it in quite a different way than they used to. Now, one of the reasons for that is because in the Tibetans, they've taken anger and hatred and pushed them together. Where in the Pali tradition, they're two different mental factors. Anger is not hatred, and hatred is not anger. But in the Tibetan, they've just sort of pushed it together. It's sort of the same thing, but in fact, they're not. So this is why His Holiness talking about anger has, modified some of the language spoken about it before, because there's got to be the harm in there. Because like we can say in the West,
Eddie? Yep. I'm just wondering, for Buddhism, what's the status of, say, you don't act on it, but you're really, really wishing somebody harm in your anger?
You harm yourself. That's anger. It's still anger.
No, I realize it's anger, but I'm trying to figure out how damaging is it? You're saying it's just damaging to
it's terrible
yourself?
for yourself. They can throw you into. We'll come to that. I've got a whole thing.
Okay. All right.
Anger. Yeah.
And you'll also come up with how to, because it's sort of like, if I only wish somebody harm, it doesn't feel like it's a really, really bad thing. It's if I act on it. So I'd be interested in the antidote to that.
So you guys, these I found it really useful to get these definitions, because you might find that they're quite different from other definitions you've come across in anger. So you've got to remember, it's like a Buddhism's sort of about spiritual development. So the anger is presented from that perspective. They used to use the word angry to describe sores or wounds on the body. So the word really depends upon the context that you use these words. And that's why you can be sort of angry about the social situation you're in. You can be angry about what the government is doing. You've got to ask yourself, well, do I want to hurt the government? Do I want to harm the people in the government? You could go, no. So this is why His Holiness has been talking about the different usages of the word anger, and how highly dependent it is upon the context you use it. So let's have a look now at the development of it. And I was saying it goes from very subtle, from the very deepest confusion. At this level here, this is not dependent upon brain and your nervous system. In other words, you could be dead, declared dead, and yet the deepest confusion is there. So here we're talking about the most subtle mind and the most subtle delusions. Then we come to called subtle. And now it manifests itself as a sort of a concern which is only about ourselves, or what they call selfish concern, or self-cherishing in Buddhism. But we can recognize this manifested in our dreams. Like, so, when you can be angry in dreams, can't you? Wish to kill something because they're out to get you. So that's an example of subtle anger. Another one I can tell you is that when you go through the dying process, when you go through the, the three colors of the white appearance, red appearance, and then the black appearance. So when that happens, this is when these types of anger and all its associated mental states vanish. But going forward, they become the sources of the actual afflictions that we engage in today. So the anger that we're quite familiar with is called gross anger. It's very easy to feel within the body, and you're angry, and other people can too.
So Eddie, with this subtle anger, is that like on a really instinctual level? It comes up regardless of our views or opinions. It's much more visceral.
Much deeper than that. That's right. Yeah, it'll support the ideas and so forth, but it's even it's like that sense of it that you could easily get fired up just because of wrong ideas. Yeah,
and yeah, I mean, I've seen people have really rough sleep and get really angry in their sleep.
Yeah. And so this type of information, like I say, this is in the book Buddhist Psychology by Geshe Tashi Sering. And it's the only place I've come across it. And it's very nicely presented there too. It's got different tables. So I can show you the relationship between all these three states. I'm going to now move on to gross anger, which is really what the show is about today. So in the development of gross anger, it can only begin with perception or conception. You either think something about the object or you apprehend it through your senses. Maybe you see it, maybe you smell it, maybe you touch it. But from that comes this idea, the conception. Now then, and of course it's on an object, and we start to exaggerate. And what we're doing is what happens is we focus on the undesirable qualities of that object, and like I said, we exaggerate them so that they seem to be one and the same as the object, and at the same time it shuts out any chance of us seeing anything desirable about the object. And depends upon that exaggeration, we believe that what we're apprehending is true. And we hold on to this belief. And then we wish to harm it.
Eddie, I've got a story about this of I can't help it, but I really don't like spiders, and I'm quite scared of them. And there's quite huge spiders in Queensland. And so of course, if I see one, I have this huge adrenaline rush and everything, exaggerate it all. And I have this belief that they're out to get me. But just recently, one of our cats was chasing a really big spider, and the spider ran inside to try to get away from the cat. And I actually was able to see that the spider was terrified. Yeah. And my whole held belief just dissolved.
Yeah, that's right. Now, so we have a lot of, so this is how we develop what we normally call anger, the anger that we're familiar with, gross anger. Now, of course, there are a lot of states that can arise before we become like angry. And there's states that are after it, which are still associated with anger. So I'll mention a few of those now. So the first thing is like confusion. And so confusion is like, before we're angry, you can be confused and then we get angry about your own confusion. So it supports it. Anyone who's ever felt like boxed into a situation you can't get out, you get upset about that. So we can first get agitated, and then if we're not released in some way, we will, as you know, become angry. There are other states that actually come from anger itself. But so these other states could be self-centered pride, vengeance, that you want to hurt the other. Spite is another. Jealousy and envy are others. Resentment. These are just some of the other mental states. In Geshe Tashi Sering's book, he's got a whole list of them. And then finally, we've got this derived from anger and ignorance. So here we've got some really quite interesting ones. A lack of consideration for others, having no shame, pretension, dishonesty, and disrespect. So these are just a few I thought I'd mention, but like again, in the book, there's a lot more of them. And what's interesting in the book was that he put a lot of extra ones in that aren't from the Buddhist lists of phenomenology. He's just going, okay, I've been in the West long enough. I know how Westerners think. We've got to include these too. So I sort of like that type of presentation, you know. So let's have a look now at some of the divisions. And I won't go into detail but right then, but I will a little later, just to show you how it all works. So the divisions of anger. First of all, persons like ourselves have to meet up with objects, and the entity itself has a type of strength, and they take place over time. So who could the persons be that will experience anger? Well, of course, oneself. Your friends could be angry, your enemies could be angry, and strangers can be angry. And you could also be angry at all of them. And when it comes to strangers, you can include pets there, animals. You don't know them, but we know animals can get angry. They can get frustrated and then angry. So these are the persons. Now, the objects they get angry with are often other persons, sentient beings. They could also get angry at their own suffering.
So Eddie, is that like self-loathing?
That's an example of it. Yeah. So, for instance, you might not like the fact that you are loathing yourself, and so you wish to harm it. But even self-loathing itself is a way of harming yourself, isn't it? It's a way of taking some sort of quality that you have that you don't like about yourself, and you wish to hurt it. And lastly, circumstances. So like, as Miffy's put up the thunderclouds, so people get really upset about the weather sometimes, especially like myself, if it's hot. You know, it doesn't take sometimes, it takes a bit, you get frustrated first and you complain a little, and then it's like the swearing starts. It's like, I'm really angry with the weather. I'd like to hurt it. I want to stop it. So anger is often used as a way of getting rid of an obstacle. But the way of removing the obstacle is through harming it. Now, the entities are what they call the big, so it could be very angry, we could be so angry, we could be enraged. Just angry. We'll have small anger. But here, remember, we've still got this intention to hurt. Now, these terms here are often used for the terms of called like anger of the desire realm, which we are in. So you can be very angry, but not much. So in other words, the duration could be like that, the quality. Now, beings who live in the form and formless realm don't have anger. This is a really rough state of mind. So there's like 9 different types of anger looked at from a couple of different directions, so you get 18. But as I'll say, there's even more. So we can be angry about the past, something that took place in the past, something that's taking place right now, or something that might take place in the future. Like, so, you know, like with the big, middling, and great, I could say that. So big is like hatred. Middling might be jealousy. And small might be like annoyance. Right? So sometimes, you know, you get mosquitoes fly around, but you just go back and just kill it. Right? So that's anger. But, you know, if you check your mind, it's not like large anger. It's just, you want to hurt it. You want to, you know, you want to stop it. So you can sort of see here, I think, it's, you know, the degrees of the anger. In terms of its heaviness, its duration, the feeling time, and so forth. So now I'm going to bring up a quote which I found immensely helpful to me. So this is from the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Hari Shantideva says, having found its fuel of discontent in the prevention of what I wish for, and in the doing of what I do not want, hatred increases and then destroys me. Now, I found this so powerful and so useful to me, which arose out of a disagreement that Miffy and I had maybe 20 years ago now, as we were first together. And she asked me to do something, I didn't want to do it. And I got upset about it, you know. And then basically said, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then she responds, blah, blah, blah. Next thing, we're having a disagreement and it's angry. And I've gotten angry. And then I've recognized it and gone, I've drawn now, remembered now karma and gone, it's impossible for Miffy to be the cause of my anger. That is impossible. Yet I'm angry. What's the cause? So I don't have to come back to myself and go, well, it's seed on the mind, the potential for you to be angry. If he's just a condition for it, and the things he's asked me, that's another condition. But it's really, it's my stuff. Then I started wondering, why? But why though? Why? What happens? And through my own investigation, I came up with this thing. I don't want to do what she asked me to. And this is like this discontent or in the prevention of what I wish for, which was just to sit on the bed and read my Dharma book. I don't want to put the rubbish out. I'm busy. So, just that thing of karma and then reading this verse was like, oh my God, that's it. That's what I've been doing most of my life. I just don't want to do things that others have asked me to do. I become discontented with that, and then it takes off. If they insist on me doing it, well, I dig down.
So, Edie, I've got to butt in here and say, so now it's almost impossible for us to have arguments because one or the other says, "Watch your mind," and what can you say to that?
Yeah, it's a lovely stopper. Or, we catch ourselves and go, can we start again? We just go, yeah, of course. I made a mistake. You're right. Okay, let's start again. So as you can see here, there's a trigger for anger. It's discontent. So now a little bit of detail now about these triggers. So like I said before, there are persons who become angry. And there's a sense of anger has within a sense of harm. Right? And the harm arises when you encounter something you don't want to encounter, when you are separated from something you hold dearly, or you are deprived from something you wish to have. So I like this because there's only three things you have to remember. And if you check back over your life and whenever you've been angry, you'll find it fits in here. So there are quite a different, there's many presentations of how you can become angry in terms of the conditions. But I find this a very easy one to hold on to. And when you check back like I did, you go, that's when I got angry. That's when I got angry. I encountered something I didn't want to. To remove it, I upped the ante. I became angry. Or something's happening to me I find really unpleasant and I want to separate myself from it. Or there's something I've wanted and wanted and wanted and it's not happening. So in response to any of those, you can become angry yourself. Now, if your friends encounter the same situations, if they encounter something they don't want, or separated from something they like, or deprived from something they really want, you could get angry too. Just because it's happening to your friends. And if your enemies encounter something that they find very useful and pleasant and helps them, you could get angry.
Well, Eddie, that seems to be the thing that's accepted commonly in society, that you're not supposed to be angry at strangers, but if people harm your family, then you're allowed to be angry and want to destroy them.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. And it goes right across the nations, doesn't it? And then this next thing, it's like we're in a war. And this process can take place right now, or it could have happened in the past, or could happen in the future. So in response to this, Shantideva says, therefore I will take in hand and well protect this mind of mine. If I can't guard and discipline the mind, what use to me are many disciplines. So what he's sort of saying here is, with mindfulness, you recollect as much as you can of what you've just heard. The conditions that give rise to anger. The development of it. So, also for anger to develop, you need an object that you find unpleasant. It cannot arise without it. And then you want to have to harm it. So, like I found, when my example I gave with Miffy was going to put out the rubbish bins. Right? So I found that unpleasant. But from that, I recognized, my God, instead of looking at things as being unpleasant, I've got to look at them as being pleasant and good to do. And that's what I started to do. And then you don't get angry. I love this stuff. Like, what use to me are many disciplines. So I'm sure you have found, just as I have found, is that I don't like, I sort of resist laws and rules coming down on top of me. Somebody telling me what to do. But you don't need anyone to tell you what to do if you discipline your own mind. Your intelligence, your mindfulness and introspection will tell you what to do. Because that was, like I said, being angry is an unpleasant experience. Not only is being angry an unpleasant experience, when somebody's angry at us, that's very unpleasant too. So let's have a look now what we can do to ameliorate these horrible feelings that we have when we experience anger. So now we begin into the other side for abandoning the anger. But before I do, I should just take a couple of moments. Are there any questions that have arisen from the material beforehand?
Eddie, just stop the screen share for a moment.
So I can also say, like these, the slides for this are up on the different sites. On Shayla's, where she works, at the site there, and we put one up on our site as well. So you can always go there and just have a look at the slides and get definitions and look at the progression and things and sort of think about it.
Are we all too worried that we're going to put a foot wrong. Like, put our foot in it asking about anger because, oh man, it's so easy to do.
Yeah, but always remember, you've got to want to harm. That element of harm is there. So, you might find yourself going too far. So if you are, just check. Do I want to hurt the object?
That really seems to be the key, because you can be really passionate about something, but you know in yourself whether there is the intention to harm or whether you're actually trying to protect others, like protect others from hurting themselves or hurting others. Like it's that is the key to it, isn't it?
Excuse me, Eddie, it's Sue.
Yeah.
The unpleasant to be seen as pleasant in that situation where you feel that you're going to get angry. What shortcuts do you use there? Because it's just natural that there's contact and then there's feeling of pleasant or unpleasant.
Yeah.
And to see it always as pleasant.
Yeah.
There's so many situations where that can happen. So.
Yeah, so so this is how I use it. So I go, okay, from the side of the object, is it unpleasant or pleasant?
It's neither.
That's right. Good. So that's coming from this side. Right? So they go, okay, that's my responsibility. All I've got to do is impute pleasant on what was I used to impute unpleasant. However, you got to go, what's the reason? Why is it now pleasant? Right. So I've got to have some reasons for that, don't I? If I've got those reasons and they're valid to me, like in terms of the world, it's really unpleasant. But in terms of my spiritual development, it's pleasant.
So
Yeah?
Eddie, that's the wisdom side of things. There you can have the emotional side of things as a shortcut of thinking, well, for instance, say someone's got to take the rubbish out, so I'll free everybody else of this distasteful job and I'll do it. So, instead of having the thought, oh, why should I take it out? It's like, well, why should Miffy take it out? I'll do it.
Yeah, but that's all the yes, that's a reasoning type thing, isn't it? And that's what we've got to do. If you want to turn the unpleasant into pleasant, it can only be done on the reasoning.
Thank you.
So we find that a lot with people who go into the army. So a lot of unpleasant things happen to you if you're training to be in the military. And those people who keep looking at it as really unpleasant often drop out, or they become bad soldiers, all that sort of stuff. But they get into trouble, of course, because you don't like what you're doing. Everything seems to be unlikable. Yet if you turn around and say, oh, actually by doing this, these are all the great benefits. So I'm going to look at it as pleasantly. That's good for me. So that's an example, the worldly one, like Miffy and me with the rubbish bins. I just went through like shit, Miffy did. If not me, then who? Well, her. Well, what's the difference between her and me? Right? Yeah. So you got to use reasoning here. Okay, let's go back then. Screen share. Yeah, so that type of discipline, the mindfulness that says the qualities aren't over there, I'm imputing them. Right? So you remember that. That's what we're mindful of. Okay, let's look now for the methods for abandoning anger. Great here, folks. There's a lot of them. So, first of all, the way I'm going to present this is through what they call the different capacities of the ability within a student. So it's often called the 3 scopes, right? The 3 capacities for practice. So the small ones means for those who are beginners on the spiritual path. So let's have a look what they've got there. So we should always remember impermanence, because anything that's produced is subject to change. So if somebody's yelling at us, it can't go on forever. Their anger will have to die down. And it's just like us. If we're angry, you find you can't be angry forever. It has to be supported by conditions and ways of thinking and so forth. If you can interrupt it anywhere along the line, you break it. But even if you don't, you will stop. You will stop feeling angry. So once you've stopped, our habit, of course, is to start back up again. But you know, that's what you've got to be like mindful of. Like, it's so unpleasant, don't do it. Sometimes we do. If we're in the face of anger, like I said, whatever it is, just can't keep it up. If we could just be patient and bear it, we'll be okay. The second thing is we can use our knowledge of the spiritual friend to help us stop being angry and responding angrily. So how's that? Well, if we are Buddhists and we've taken refuge in the Buddha, we're meant to be walking around with the Buddha up on above our head, our teacher. Should be wherever we go, we imagine him on our head walking with us, or at the level of our heart. So, you know, one of the great purposes of doing that is you be very careful about how you behave if you think your teacher's right there with you. Don't you? I know, I'm pretty sure when everybody's at the center, or wherever the center, nobody just, you know, everybody sort of restrains themselves, don't they?
Best behavior.
Best behavior. Everyone's respectful of their teacher. So here it's the same thing. Respect, and the lovely thing is respect for the other, respect for yourself, respect for your teacher. It'll hold you back. The lower realms. Now, lower realms here, we're looking at the future outcome of our angry behavior. So I read a lovely quote the other day when a Western student asked a Tibetan Lama, what is the function of anger? What's its purpose? And he said, to throw you into the lower realms. So that's the worst outcome, isn't it? It's the fruitional outcome of anger. So, whoa, it's good though, isn't it? That's what you need to hear.
That's brutal.
Yeah, you get that sort of whack in the head sometimes, don't we? And imagine losing it. Somebody got really angry and then died of a heart attack. Well, you find yourself in the lower realms. We don't want that to happen. The faults of anger. So there are many, which we'll go through a little bit later, but I'll just say we need to recollect, if you can recollect the faults of anger, it's very, very useful to you.
And Eddie, that's where our self-interest can finally have some use, you know, of, well, at the very least, even if I still hate my enemy, I don't want to do anything about it because it's really going to harm me, ruin my health, all of those things.
Yeah. So of course, with ourselves, in terms of the faults of anger, you know, we could, like, killing is an expression of anger. Stealing could be an expression of anger. Sexual misconduct could be an expression of anger. Harsh speech, lying, divisive speech, and even gossip could be driven by anger. So then you come up to malice, the mental quality of malice. So we need to recognize that all these behaviors of speech and mind are coming from malice, ill will, and restrain yourself, because the outcomes are just terrible. Leading to the abandonment of malice. So with these methods for abandonment, there are two main methods, one which is temporary and one that's permanent. The ones I'm talking about now are all temporary. But we will mention the ones that are permanent shortly. Now, karma, please, like, this is the big, when we take refuge in the Buddha, we're taking refuge in our understanding of karma. So in terms of anger, anger produces the ripening result of lower realm rebirth. It produces the environmental result of being homeless in harsh landscapes with poor resources. It produces the experiential result of being in threatening and violent situations. and it produces the behavioral result of becoming angry again. So in terms of karma, 4 results: behavior, experiential, environmental, and fruitional. In terms of refuge, well, you destroy your refuge. Refuge is what it's like, you know, the safe direction. Well, you're not safe when you're angry. In fact, anger itself destroys the mind of enlightenment. So, you know, we're taking refuge in the Mahayana Dharma. We take refuge in the 3 jewels and the mind of enlightenment. Anger is the complete contrary mind to the mind of enlightenment.
So Eddie, in here with refuge, is this like on a generic level, seeking a higher power, seeking refuge, like please help me, Buddha? actually taking refuge in external Buddha and internal Buddha, and then that will at least alleviate the impetus of anger.
Well, we take refuge because we want to put an end to our suffering, don't we? So then you think, well, you know, I want to put an end to my suffering and I'm angry. Now, how's that working out for us? Look, we can't do those 2 things. You either take refuge in anger or you take refuge in Dharma. And Dharma is non-harmfulness, no harm. So these are some of the things we can rely on of our knowledge in the small scope, or you know, the practices for those of small capacity. Now we look at the practices for those of middling capacity. So when we look at the first 2 truths, truth of suffering and truth of origin, that's where we find anger, what causes it and so forth, and the effects of it. Now to put an end to it, we've got to come to truth of path and truth of cessation. So truth of path is a method. The method, of course, is primarily one of wisdom, but we can also be method itself. And it should be about truth of cessation. Yeah.
This is about getting rid of anger forever. This isn't just like learning to live with it. You know, like people say it's natural.
Well, it is natural. But it doesn't mean to say it's good for you. It's a natural outcome for beings like us who are samsaric beings. But it's completely natural, anger. But we should know that, you know, there is an ending of it, and there are means to do it. So if we could find what those means are and engage in them, we should. 12 dependent links. This is wonderful too. It's like you pointed out, Sue, right? You've got to have an object. You've got to make contact with the object. So feeling arises. Then you cling to the feeling. So you go, oh, okay. What if I remove myself from the object? Well, now you can't make contact with it. If you don't make contact, then you can't have the feeling. If you don't have the feeling, you can't cling. So you find ways of interrupting. You know, once you know the progression, this is the wonderful thing about knowing out what causes things to happen. You know, okay, these links are all conditions for something to come about. Yeah, the conditions to produce suffering is one of them. I can interrupt it then, as it's conditional. Now, 3 higher trainings, of course, this is like Miffy said, you know, we're not just going to think, yeah, well, yeah, it is natural, so nothing can be done. We're going to say, like, okay, no, I actually want to put an end to it altogether. So that means I need to engage in a higher practice of ethics, higher concentration, and higher wisdom. But if I want to really put an end to it, that's it, which leads us to higher training in wisdom. So now these lighter blue ones that are going to come up is like, that's how you put an end to it permanently. Whereas the other colors are temporary. So in terms of the great scope, so one of the practice, so you'll see in there, you can, you know, equanimity, all beings have been our mothers, the kindness of our mothers, the love and concern for our mothers. Well, right there, all those work against anger. Those 4 practices, they all go against anger. equalizing, exchanging oneself for others, another practice. The equanimity developed there, once again, you can't be angry. Stops it temporarily. Thought transformation. So there are lots of practices, and we're going to come up with a couple of them as we go along. I think, yes. So we'll bring it up there. But thought transformation, work against anger. So in other words, when other people are really angry at you, where before you didn't like it, now you can go, oh, thank you, I like it. You've transformed your mind. You have to have good reasons for thinking that, though, and you can have. Not only that, when you yourself have felt very angry and recognized it, you can turn it into a part of your path. Right? Like, for instance, going, like I've been really angry, and so many other people have been angry too. In fact, all sentient beings can become angry. May this here, the anger I'm feeling right now, become a support for their anger. May it become the foundation where it can hold the anger of all sentient beings. Like, give it to me, I'll take it. Right? So we can use anger in that way. Now, of the perfections, of course, patience is another major component that works against anger. And the wisdom realizing emptiness. Now these next, so these are the ones we're most familiar with. I'm sure anybody, at least in the Galupa tradition, go to, and the stages of the sutra path. But we also know there are practices that aren't sutra, they're based on it, but they're not sutra practices. So I have called them direct awareness practices. So we should recollect that we have Buddha nature, and what you know about Buddha nature, meaning anger is not an intrinsic part of the mind. But in fact, there are all sort of antidotes to anger, and it can be removed from the mind. Highest Yoga Tantra. Here we transform the energy of anger. So it's not anger itself, it's the energy of anger. We take the energy of anger and transform it into the wrathful appearance, into the compassionate appearance of a wrathful deity. And that's on the completions, on the...
That I think the other way around, the wrathful appearance of a compassionate deity.
The essence of it, the appearance is wrathful, but you've got to understand it's compassion. The empty nature of it is the wisdom aspect, and they're together. Mahamudra and also in Dzogchen. Once again, here we're just taking the empty bliss nature of the anger. So here, like I had this interesting experience once when I was really angry, and I had the opportunity to kill somebody, and I was actually sitting on them, and I had them at my mercy. And while I'm looking at them, everything became really clear, incredibly clear to me. And I stopped. Because I thought, you don't need to hurt this person any further. But I always remembered it was so unusual, right? Just the clarity of it. And later on, I read in Buddhism, the flip side of anger is called mirror-like wisdom. So anger is transformed into the tantras into a type of wisdom called mirror-like. And that mirror-like is the clarity. Everything appears very, very clear in a mirror. And I remember that happening to me in my mind at that time. And just going, there's no need to do any more. I just hopped off it. So you'll know yourself when you are angry. It gives you great impetus, doesn't it? And you think you can see it really clearly. So the energy of it has this ability to transform.
So it is our kind of task then to have that clarity without the intention to harm, with
That's
the
right.
completely different intention.
That's right.
But we've somehow, that we rely on that anger or that intention to harm for that degree of clarity to arise just normally. I mean, because this happens to a lot of people. They get like white hot anger and they see everything really clearly, but it's really devastating, like the result, because it's not informed by
destruction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Driving is a sense of destruction, destroying something. That's right. So we can take out that sense. If the only thing you want to destroy is ignorance itself, and that's the point, is to take the energy and destroy ignorance. And what you see is everything is this massive clarity that things don't have the qualities that you imputed to them. But you see, they actually lack that. Anyway, so let's go on. So now here we go, the faults of anger. So the major one I want to put up here is this. Everything appears to be an enemy to you. Now, the thing to remember about this is that, so in other words, when somebody in front of you is angry, you need to give at least 10 seconds before you respond to them. Because if you respond to them beforehand, whatever you say to them arises as an enemy to them, supports their anger. But if you notice those million times where you see people really angry and somebody tries to stop them and they just get attacked.
Yeah, or you say something and they hear the opposite.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So this is this terrible thing. The other thing I always, as Holiness said, the worst thing about anger is that you can't reason. It stops your reasoning. It's like you've already made your mind up and then you can't go against it. So there's a text out called The Buddhist Teachings on Social and Communal Harmony by Bhikshu Bodhi. So in there's like 25 different methods working against anger in terms of society. I just mentioned that one to you. But in terms of our own body, right, you get high blood pressure, stress, anxiety, headaches, poor blood circulation. In fact, one 5-minute episode of anger is so stressful, it can damage your immune system for up to 6 hours. They also did an experiment where they got people to verbally express their anger and they trapped the molecules that were expressed. So they found the molecules expressed in an hour of anger were enough to kill 80 guinea pigs. You'll also know, if you've ever had a look at those things about the water and how anger can change the molecules in the water. It was really destructive on a physical, just on the physical level. Then, of course, what it does to the mind and your health and so forth. So it's not, I mean, it's a natural emotion that we have. But at the same time, it's got a lot of downside to it.
So Eddie, for a while, we had a neighbor that was like this, that all appearances arose as the enemy. Every single person that walked past their yard was an enemy, and they were like their complete state of being was one of continuous rage.
Yeah.
And then it would just manifest whenever anything happened, a bird, a person, the garbage man, like anything at all. It's a terrible state to be stuck in. Like it's a really like a hell.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you often see so the faces of these people become very red. Oftentimes when they talk, spittle will come out of their mouth. So often says one of the great faults of anger is that whatever beauty you have is lost. You become someone others are afraid of. And even if you do good things for them, they still fear you. So you see there's much information in the Bodhisattva's way of life about the faults of anger. And in terms of actually our attempts to deal with anger, this is where we should start, the faults of anger. So we can actually see how it harms us physically and mentally, and how it harms all of your relationships. It harms your place in society. It can do so much damage to you. And reading all that, you'll have a natural hesitancy about becoming angry again. So that's where we sort of, the best place to start for people like ourselves. Now, in terms of Buddhist training, we have compassion training. And that begins with what they call the 4 immeasurable thoughts. So equanimity, wishing that all beings be free from the bias of attachment and aversion. So aversion is a type of anger. Loving kindness, wishing that all beings have happiness in its causes. Compassion, wishing that all beings be free from suffering and its causes. And a joy, sense of joy, wishing that all beings never be separated from higher rebirths and liberation and its causes. Now, all of these 4 immeasurable thoughts work against anger. And they lead to what we call the practice of patience. They support patience. So patience is of 3 types. First is a type of patience called non-retaliation to those who harm. Towards the inanimate, meaning the weather, the computer screen, and voluntary acceptance.
The internet.
I better keep moving because I can see us, we're running out of time, aren't we? What is it, Charlotte? Can you tell us how much time we have? Or Miffy?
It's about 20 past. But
Okay,
please don't skip out anything for us. We've come this far.
Okay.
I agree.
So, okay, then, so here we can do, I'll just do a little analytical meditation. So, we don't need to sit cross-legged or anything, we just need to think. So the first question is, can you accept the Buddhist definition of anger? So you might have to go, my mindfulness is, what was it again? So you have to sort of remember it, break it down and go, yeah, okay, makes sense to me. We accept that definition. Right then. So what happens to you when you get angry? Can you find 3 things that are positive or beneficial about anger? How about 3 poor outcomes when you use anger? So when you were angry in the past, what results were achieved? Did you get something else you didn't plan for when you were angry? And if you did, what was it? And did you find that helpful? Okay, that's it. So as Holiness has said, when others harm us, the way we should think about it is a bit like this, right? The person who is harming or disturbing me is encouraging me to be patient. Since it is impossible to make any progress on a spiritual path without being patient, this person is of great benefit to me. And finally, there was this lovely question I wrote down and said, if those who care for you remember the words and actions of your anger, what do you think your enemies will remember? Now, okay, next slide. So we've got there's other methods we can use for the abandonment of anger. And these are to question our logic, equanimity, compassion, offering victory. So here we have the thought transformation process and directed awareness. Now, when we use the term of questioning logic, remember anger never ever consists of pure emotion without any form of logic in there. Right? There's always some sort of logical part in there, some sort of conception in there, a thinking aspect. So that's where you can really work, right? Find out what is driving the anger. What are my thoughts? What are my conceptions? Why am I angry? If you can find that, then you can work against it, because that's where you've gone wrong.
So Edie, so many times anger arises through a misunderstanding, that this one, just of having this questioning attitude, would help us clear that up. It's like the easy place to start, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you can look at the faults, start with the faults and go, oh, they're all bloody terrible, but I get angry. Why do I get angry? Look at find the reasons. You'll find they're false. They're based on some sort of falsity. It's a wrong idea. Correct the idea, you won't be angry when you meet the situation again. So here we go. Questioning the logic. So what's the main cause of anger? That's the first you should ask. It is never anything external to you, ever. That's the first thing. And you go like, and somebody says, why not? He says, well, you need causes to produce suffering. Anything external to me is not the substantial cause for anger. It's something like I was just all right. Now I've changed. I've become angry. So the substantial cause must be here, must be on the mind stream.
So is it like dissatisfaction? Is that it? Is that
say,
like when people...
You'd say it's just the seed of anger. So the seed of anger could be, yeah, dissatisfaction. I'm not getting what I want. I've somehow or other been prevented. But I'm getting what I don't want. These sort of things. Yeah? What does anger depend on? An object. Yeah. Well, remove your mind from the object or remove the object. You won't get angry. Who does anger hurt? One of the people will be yourself. In fact, there's no certainty at all that you'll hurt the other with your words, but you will hurt yourself. Here's this lovely question. Is what I'm thinking true? So, question the logic. In terms of the compassion, there's some impartiality. On the small scope, we wish that all beings have overcome their afflictions towards one another. In the middle scope, we overcome our attachment and anger towards others. And the great scope is we overcome favoritism. And we can use this little prayer, you know. This one, the 4 immeasurables, is called Immeasurable Compassion. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and its causes. May they be free. I myself, alone if necessary, shall cause them to be free. Please, Guru Buddha. You know. Meditational deities, protectors, all enlightened beings, inspire me, help me to do this. As you can see, it's always got these 4 parts. So it's nice when you use them all 4, one after another, and just pause and just let it sink in. Now we come to thought transformation. Now when anger is expressed towards you, stop seeing it as a wrong. That's one thing. How can you do that? Why could you do that? You have to recall the teachings on karma. You would only have somebody expressing anger towards you as if you have done harm to others in the past. That's the only reason. It's a karmic consequence. If you hadn't put in place the cause, you wouldn't get the effect. So you can't see it as being wrong. Right? If you look at what's happening here, from an ethical viewpoint, you go, this is wrong, what's going on here. But in terms of cause and effect, it's not wrong at all. It's just a natural outcome of external and internal cause and effect.
So, Eddie, that's quite different from, say, victim blaming, saying, well, it's your
Massively
fault, because the fault, of course, isn't, you know, my fault. It's karma and delusion's fault.
That's right.
But that's a good distinction to make, that on a worldly ethical level, there's one view, but if we want to change things, we've got to have this bigger picture.
Yeah, we want to work in accordance with the Buddhist teaching, right? And enlightened beings' teachings, not a worldly thing. But so I found this also very useful. Yeah, like in terms of the world, you know, external to us, relying on cause and effect. What you got? That's out of my hands. But it all works on cause and effect. Now then, the internal thing, that's cause and effect too. That's mental cause and effect. That's karma and delusion. Now there is a meeting place between internal cause and effect and external. But what that is very, very difficult to discern. That's for an enlightened being.
And Eddie, this thought transformation, I mean, it's really confronting, but also if you're strong enough, it's liberating.
Yeah, that's right. And it does require strength and courage to use thought transformation. So you can take it, use it as something valuable. So in other words, when you find yourself experiencing any form of suffering, see this as being valuable. You go, well, I've got this effect. If I don't want to have these effects in the future, I've got to not put in place the cause. And whatever cause that is in place, I've got to remove it. So we can use purification practices. But yeah, like you see something like this, it's valuable because it gives you the chance to express compassion, a courageous compassion. You know, because you look at that, you go, a lot of these people here are trying to be happy and do what they call the right thing and be good. But actually what they're doing is causing more suffering for themselves and others. You know, I've got to help them. Whereas if you were angry about it, you wouldn't be trying to help them. You want to be hurting some of those people there, stopping them in harmful ways. Here's a slight thing of giving and taking. So take all the hatred, take the anger, put it on the self-cherishing heart, put it on the self-cherishing mind. In response to the harm, give love and kindness. Now, another simple analogy of this is use the example of doctors. So when doctors meet up with distraught patients who are yelling and screaming and obscenities at them and trying to hurt them, the doctors don't strike them back, do they? They don't start swearing and yelling at them. They know this person's in great pain, suffering immensely. My job is to help them put an end to their pain. It's the same with us. The Buddha was called the great physician, the great doctor. His response to the anger and hatred in the world was patience, love and kindness, love and concern. And he's saying, we follow the Buddha as the example. So it's possible for us to do it too. It will require good reasoning and stable reasoning and practice. Little things and big things. But like so much of this is on the level of imagination. That's the wonderful thing. You can try just on the level of imagination and generate more and more courage, and you'll find you can actually do it.
So Eddie, that example that you gave of the doctors and the abuse, like that's continuously amazes me, to be able to withstand abuse day after day after day, and stupidity and yet still put all that effort into helping
Help.
others. Like,
Yeah.
that's got to be a really deep motivation right there to be able to help
But look,
others.
what's happening now, isn't it? The doctors and the nurses are doing this right now in this pandemic. And then they're finding it very difficult to do it, but they are doing it. Now, the last one is what we call directing awareness. This is a terrific practice. It doesn't require initiations or anything. It just requires, what do you call it, introspection, that you're on the ball. So you ask yourself, okay, so is anger mental or physical? What do you think?
Mental.
It's mental, isn't it? So, okay, if it's mental, it's coming from the mind. Okay, then it can only be in one of three places: past, present, or future. Well, it's not on the past because it's gone. Can't be on the future because it hasn't happened. So the only place it could be is happening right now. Right? So it's like, is it?
Yes.
So you got, no, you won't say yeah. You'll go, I can't find it. That's what happens all the time. So about a month ago, Geshe Sopo gave this teaching of how to do this. It's just what I said. Ask yourself, is it mental or physical? It's not physical, it's mental. Okay, it's on the mind. Where? If it's mental, it can only be in the past, the present, or the future. You rule the past and future out, then it's on the present. It's like, where's the present mind?
Yeah, because even if it's now, this moment, the next moment, it's in the past.
That's right. So what all you find is mind is natural state, clear, open. There's no anger there. Anger vanishes. This is a major thing of Mahamudra, Dzogchen, insight practices, all that stuff. So simple and quick you can do. Whoops, too late. What does this mean? It means you got angry. What are you going to do after you get angry? You can apologize. You can say sorry.
You're going to run around like a chook with its head cut off.
If you say sorry to someone else you got angry at, apologize to yourself too. Don't be harsh on yourself. You're under the control of delusions. It's not like you deliberately thought, I know what, I'll hack myself in her and I'll yell and scream at her. That'll do. You don't think like that. No one does. It just comes out. So be kind to the other opponent, be kind to yourself. Accept it and decide to do better. You can recollect, like I said, the Buddha nature, that anger is adventitious, it comes and goes. It's not intrinsic part of your mind. It's never, ever penetrated the clear and cognizant nature of mind. Rooted ignorance can't stand up to reason. That last meditation of looking, it can't stand up to your intelligence that looks. It's not there, vanishes. Or you can do that, you can go back to do the 4 opponent powers, using regret, a remedy, resolve, and reliance. There's a lot we can do.
So, Eddie, with that one, the thing is to recognize, whoops, too late, that we've actually made a mistake, isn't it? Rather than perpetuate it or justify it.
Yeah, don't dig in. Don't dig in. Like I said, what Miffy and I do, we just say, let's start again. But if somebody you don't know, you can even say that, I'm so sorry, could we start again? And we give it another shot. So basically, we know what anger is, we know a lot about its faults, we know what it is, we know that there are antidotes to them. It's up to us to apply what we know. But this is mindfulness. And we need to be vigilant to notice that am I getting worked up enough to become angry? What's my antidote? What have I put in place? What's my go-to? And we go to it. Summary, same sort of thing again. For next week, read something again about mindfulness and vigilance, search and find a teaching online, and see if you can relate it to what we've talked about today. Because like I said, these two mental factors, that you talk about any type of delusion, you want to overcome it, mindfulness and vigilance are there. You can't do it without them. I said, mindfulness recollects you have an antidote. Vigilance tells you, how well is my antidote working? So does anybody, I mean, I think we must be over now. Anybody like to ask anything at all to start to wind it up? How's it going? No final questions? Oh, yep, there is.
I've got work to do.
Okay. I'm just going to dedicate it now then.
Applying it to my anger, I mean.
Oh, okay. Oh, all of us, Delma.
Oh,
Yeah,
they've
we've
all
got work to
gone.
do.
Where's everyone gone?
No, let's dedicate. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, we quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And may the supreme jewel body Bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. And while as long as space endures and there are beings who are bound by delusion, may we remain to drive away their sorrows. Okay, thank you everybody, and my apologies for going over. We'll see you again next week. Thank you everyone.